This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Stranded in South Africa, travel bans of a new COVID-19 variant hits foreigners. Hoping for a new era, Central African Republic citizens ready to vote on Sunday. And the coronavirus has reached every continent, with Antarctica seeing its first infections at a Chilean station. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at the stories coming up this hour. Egyptians abroad sent $22.1 billion back home in just 9 months this year, despite COVID-19 slowdowns. And in sports, Kenyan striker Olunga scoops top award at the J-League Football Awards. At least 5 countries and airlines, including Germany, Britain and Turkey, have banned flights from South Africa. This over the discovery of a new variant of the coronavirus. Many foreigners are now stranded in South Africa as they don't know when they will be able to fly back to their countries. Tuli Shabalala has that story.
Marina Veseloveski, her husband and 2 daughters are German citizens who arrived in the coastal city of Cape Town earlier this month. The Veseloveskis were hoping to only celebrate the festive season with relatives and friends in South Africa. But South Africa has reported a new variant of the coronavirus, resulting in Germany banning flights from the southern African nation. Now, the family is uncertain when they will be able to return home.
That is shocking, and I don't quite know which way things are going to go, and we're here to spend Christmas with our family, and I don't know, we'll see what will happen. Obviously we need to return because we have to look after our business, and our children are studying, and we need to go and do things back at home.
Marina came to visit her 76-year-old mother. And due to COVID-19 related restrictions, the hardest part of her visit is not being able to hug her after a year apart.
She's been very lonely because she's on her own, and a huge portion of the year she was alone in her apartment. But we're all following the rules and keeping our distance with her. It's very difficult to see your mom after a year and you can't hug her.
Health officials in South Africa say the new genetic mutation of COVID-19 may be responsible for a recent surge of infections in the country. A growing number of countries, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, Tunisia and Sudan, all halted air travel to and from South Africa, while they assess how much danger the new variant poses. South Africa's tourism department says it has no information on the number of flights cancelled or rescheduled due to the bans. But it is working with the Foreign Ministry and foreign embassies to facilitate contact between foreign citizens in South Africa and their governments. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
The new variant of coronavirus in South Africa is unrelated to the one in the UK. Dr. Angelique Coetzee, chairperson of the South African Medical Association, tells us more about this new strain.
There is 3 structural variants of this type of virus that's now currently, or this lineage that's currently going around. And the one that is of extremely importance to us is the 501.V2, and as that is of the 3, the one that spreads the fastest, and it seems to be responsible for 90% of our current infections. In saying that, it is important to also understand the variant that gave us the first wave is still here. It's not gone. It's just that this new one moves much faster, and then the other 2 mutations that is also part of this new lineage, less dominant at this stage, but it seems that they might have an influence on our antibodies and makes it a bit difficult for antibodies to detect. Luckily for South Africa and the rest of the world, the same protocols, the protocols of wearing the mask, the 1.5 meter, and we always say 1.5 meters is more or less a broomstick length, because people doesn't always understand how far is 1.5 meters. So, and the sanitizing, and very, very important, especially in Africa now, with this festive season, is natural ventilation. If people can stay outdoors as much as possible, if you have your braai outdoors, if you have your family meal outdoors, if you want to have a very nice evening or afternoon with your family, do it outdoors, because the ventilation extremely important. So nothing changed in the precautionary measurements that needs to be taken against this virus. But people, I think they are COVID fatigue. They do not listen anymore, especially the young people. Of concern to us, it seems that this new virus variant that we are now seeing, it's got a, doesn't really distinguish between whether you're young or old, and it sort of attacks the 20 pluses, especially if you are severely overweight.
Let's link up now with CGTN correspondent Sumitra Naidu, joining us live from Johannesburg. Sumitra, how is South Africa handling this new variant of COVID-19? Are there any protocols or control measures now?
Well, Peninah, there hasn't been any new announcements in terms of this new variant. There are some conflicting reports of whether it is the same as the one affecting the UK right now. Some quarters are saying that it's not the same variant, but the Health Department has identified it as the 501V2 variant, similar to that of the UK. It was first detected in Nelson Mandela Bay in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa and has since spread to several other provinces. Now, the Health Department has appealed to South Africans and visitors to the country to social distance, wear masks and stay away from large gatherings. The tighter restrictions announced by the President last week remains in place and include a ban on events and large gatherings, which have been dubbed super spreading events. We're still on level 1 lockdown, but government has reverted to banning liquor sales over the weekend. Alcohol will only be sold Monday to Thursday from 8 to 6 p.m. All the country's public beaches will remain closed until the first week of January. The Health Department has also requested all public hospitals to make more beds available for COVID patients. They've also cautioned against transporting patients from one hospital to another, as we know that, you know, there's this this new variant actually in the second wave is taking a huge strain on the hospitals, and they are running out of capacity. The curfew has also been moved from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. All service establishments are still to close at 10 p.m. We're not clear at this stage if government will make any more announcements, but the Command Council seems to be happy with the protocols that are currently in place.
Okay, and Sumitra, talk to us about the government's reaction to these travel bans being issued against the country over this new variant.
Well, you know, Peninah, we haven't actually, we haven't received any official announcement about, you know, about this new variant and about the travel bans. But South Africa did say previously anyone traveling from South Africa will have to adhere to the COVID rules and regulations of the country they're traveling to. So far, 5 countries have banned travel from South Africa, Israel, that's Israel, Turkey, Germany, Saudi Arabia and Switzerland. They've all halted air travel to and from South Africa. These bans will also affect international travelers that are in South Africa and want to return to any of these countries. As I say, we haven't received any official announcement as to what government is going to do concerning this new variant. They did announce that they've discovered this new variant, and they are speaking to various companies about possible vaccines and alternatives, but there hasn't been anything new to update on the protocols that are currently in place or anything in terms of the bans for travelers.
All right, Sumitra, thank you very much for that update. Sumitra Naidu live for us in Johannesburg. Nigeria has begun reinstating some restrictions it had lifted earlier after a second COVID-19 wave hit the country. The reintroduced measures are aimed at stopping large gatherings as health authorities battle the increasing coronavirus cases. CGTN's Deji Badmas has that story.
Following the recent spike in COVID-19 infections, the government has been forced to act quickly. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has announced the reintroduction of measures to stop the spread of the virus.
We would be presenting to the states our advisories with regards to to consider closing all bars, nightclubs, pubs, and event centers, and recreational venues for the next 5 weeks. Close all the restaurants except those providing services to hotel residents, takeaways, home deliveries, and drive-in. Restrict all informal and formal festivity events, including weddings, conferences, congresses, office parties, concerts, seminars, sporting activities, end-of-year events, to a number of 50 persons. D, limit all gatherings linked to religious events to less than 50% capacity of the facility, during which physical distancing, mandatory use of face masks shall be strictly enforced.
The restrictions also include limiting the number of passengers in commercial vehicles to 50% of their capacity, the enforcement of the use of face masks in public places, and that a category of government workers should work from home for the next 5 weeks. The chair of the task force stopped short of placing restrictions on international flights, something quite a number of people have been calling for.
The PTF, the Aviation Authority, and the health authorities, including the World Health Organization, are assessing the situation closely and will take a position as soon as cogent scientific bases are established.
For bars and nightclubs like this one, the restriction is a big blow to business. It only just fully reopened about 2 months ago after shutting down for over 6 months during the first wave of the virus. Managers of the club say another closure will hit them hard.
Since like 9 months now, no salary for my workers, no salary for me. So I don't know where the government is taking this to. If they are bringing back the lockdown, because it will actually affect everybody, affect me and my family and my workers too.
I'm not going to tell the government how to run their business because I'm not a health personnel, but they should we should adhere to the precaution of the COVID-19. But the lockdown again will be the effect will be so disastrous.
With Nigeria currently dealing with an economic recession, authorities will be doing all they can to avoid a lockdown. But a continued spike in COVID-19 infections could make things even more difficult for the government and could force it to make a choice between economics and health.
We are in for a very difficult time, but I know with the support of Nigerians, with your cooperation in the media, we can weather this storm. We can navigate these difficult times.
In the meantime, President Muhammadu Buhari has extended the mandate of the COVID-19 task force to March next year, saying it's still needed. It was expected to finish its operations by the end of this year. Deji Badmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The coronavirus has now reached every continent. Antarctica saw its first cases of COVID-19, with at least 36 people infected at a Chilean research station. It includes 26 army personnel and 10 civilian contractors. Chile's military scrambled to evacuate the patients and quarantine staff. Days earlier, several cases had been discovered on a supply ship that had just returned from base. To the Central African Republic, where rebels have seized Bambari, the country's 4th largest city, just 5 days before the general election scheduled for Sunday. According to the mayor, the city is currently under control of the rebels. Rwanda and Russia have sent military troops and supplies to the country to help counter a surge in violence by the rebel groups. The United Nations peacekeeping mission there says its troops are on high alert and is helping to deliver voting materials across the country. Armed groups are threatening to march on the capital and disrupt Sunday's election, but President Touadera says the vote will not be postponed. The head of the UN peacekeeping mission, NCAR, Mankur Ndiaye, has also said the international community believes the election must take place.
The international community believes that the elections must take place on 27th December to respect the timeline laid down by the Constitution. It also condemns the attempts by the alliance of armed groups and some political stakeholders to prevent the country from moving through a new political transition in a flagrant violation of the Constitution.
Meanwhile, registered voters in Bangui have begun to collect their voting cards in preparation for the upcoming general election on Sunday. And as CGTN's Enoch Sekolia reports, registration centers were overwhelmed with long queues, a possible sign of the residents' determination to turn the page on the violence and division which the country has endured since 2013.
Thousands of residents in the Central African Republic are looking forward to Sunday's elections. Many of them in various districts began collecting their voting cards since early on Tuesday morning, a development the United Nations says is promising.
So what we are seeing is that the population is expressing the desire to vote on the 27th of this month. Already in this center, it is 2.5 days since the beginning of the voter card distributions, and already 65% of the voter cards were claimed by the population. This is a very good sign that the people want to take their cards and want to go to the elections on the 27th of December.
I'm reassured that I have to vote. I know the vote will take place, and that's a good thing for me and the country.
There are over 3,500 centers across CAR where registered voters are collecting cards. With over 1.8 million registered voters, these sites have seen an influx in activity. Electoral officials from the National Election Authority are at hand to provide necessary electoral information and any growing concerns to the population coming out for cards. And despite increasing tensions in the Central African Republic, MINUSCA has put its peacekeepers on high alert to ensure the conditions are favorable and conducive for holding peaceful presidential and legislative elections. The UN agency has also transported voting materials across the country in a bid to make the process available to all registered voters. Enoch Sekolia, CGTN.
Israel is headed for its fourth election in 2 years after a last-ditch effort to keep the government afloat failed. Lawmakers missed a deadline to pass a new budget, forcing Parliament to dissolve and automatically triggering new elections in March. Negotiations broke down between the government's two main parties, with them rejecting a proposal to push back the deadline. It comes after weeks of fighting among the country's so-called unity government and controversy swirling around Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who faces corruption charges. You're watching Africa Live. We're taking a quick break. Coming up, cementing the new relationship, Morocco and Israel signed several agreements in Rabat. And Egypt hosts a car race around the pyramids of Giza for locally manufactured electric cars.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The U.S. has sent Navy ships off the coast of Somalia to support the withdrawal of its personnel. At least 700 personnel who have been assisting with intelligence, training Somali troops and counter-terrorism operations against the Al-Shabaab are due to leave by mid-next month. In November, it was announced that U.S. President Donald Trump planned to draw down U.S. troops in Somalia, part of an effort to pull back forces globally, including in Afghanistan and Iraq, before he leaves office on January 20th. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello is keeping an eye on this story. We have him joining us live from Mogadishu. Abdul, what more can you tell us about the U.S. troops drawdown?
Well, Peninah, the U.S. Africa Command in a statement is not calling it a drawdown or a withdrawal. Instead, it's calling it a direct repositioning. That means moving U.S. boots in Somalia to other regions within East Africa, most probably in Kenya, where it has a strong base towards the coastal town of Mombasa, as well as in Djibouti, that is home to the biggest U.S. Military base in the African continent. Now, as you've mentioned, the U.S. has dispatched an aircraft carrier along the Somali coast that is going to oversee the repositioning of U.S. forces from Somalia. The number of forces that we're talking about is around 700, according to Pentagon, and they will be distributed within East Africa to continue with the fight against Al-Shabaab. As you've mentioned also, it's part of the U.S. President Donald Trump's effort of minimizing and removing American boots on the ground. The U.S. forces have been stationed in Somalia for close over a decade now, assisting the Somali forces and African Union troops, AMISOM, in counter-terrorism operations that has actually played an important role in dislodging Africa's deadliest militant group from the vast part of the country. Before the U.S. forces came to Somalia, nearly 70% of the country was under the control of the militant group Al-Shabaab, but with support of the U.S. aerial firepower and the American boots on the ground, the joint efforts by the Somali forces as well as the African Union troops have been vital in dislodging Al-Shabaab and weakening it to a situation where the Somali government has been able to flex its muscles and create regional administrations all across the country. But this drawdown from Somalia does not just affect Somalia, as you've mentioned. It also affects other countries in Iraq and Afghanistan. So the opinion on the ground is that it's timely, and it comes at a time when Somalia is at transition.
Okay, so timely, Abdul, but really, what's the reaction there, especially about how ready the Somali security agencies are to pick up and continue on their own?
That's the most important question that many people here are asking on the ground, and opinion is divided. There are some who are supporting the move by the U.S. forces to withdraw its troops, and others are opposed to this move. Some of those who are supporting this move are of the view that yes, it's time that the U.S. forces did reposition their forces out of Somalia, so that it can be a wake-up call to the Somali government and its security architecture plan that it needs to take control of the national security, and it cannot rely on foreign forces. And the same applies to the African Union force AMISOM, that is due to start a gradual drawdown of its troops and hand over security responsibility to the federal government of Somalia. So the supporters of this move are of the view that yes, the Somali government needs to take security responsibility now and no longer rely from Somali forces. And there are also people of the view that the Somali forces are not yet ready to go it alone, owing to the number of attacks that we've witnessed recently. Just last week, the militant group Al-Shabaab staged a deadly suicide attack targeting a delegation of the Somali Prime Minister who was supposed to visit the central Somali town of Galkayo, killing top government officials, including security personnel from Danab. Now, Danab is the elite military unit of the Somali army that has been trained and mentored by the U.S. government, and the pullout of the U.S. troops from Somalia will definitely impact this special unit that has been very vital in countering insurgency. They've been trained in attacking Al-Shabaab in their strongholds, capturing top Al-Shabaab commanders, and it has proved to be a very lethal force in Somalia. And one of the success stories of the relationship between Mogadishu and Washington is Danab. So the pullout of the American forces from Somalia definitely will deal a deadly blow to the years of insurgency campaign that it has done here in Somalia. But also in a statement from AFRICOM, it says that Al-Shabaab should not test the capability of U.S. forces, saying that it will strike and target them at their own place, at their time of their own choosing. So definitely it's something to watch in the next coming years, in the coming months, whether Somali forces will be yet ready to go it alone.
All right, Abdul, thank you for that update. Abdulaziz Billy live in Mogadishu. Moroccan and Israeli officials have signed several memorandums of understanding in Rabat, Morocco, to mark the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. The Israeli delegation was accompanied by Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, an architect of pan-Arab rapprochement with Israel. According to officials, the investments will focus on economic development, supporting entrepreneurship and technology in Morocco. Both Israel and Morocco anticipate a surge in tourism about such connections, mainly among the hundreds of thousands of Israelis of Moroccan descent through the deal. The move was forged by the White House in a parting foreign policy push by U.S. President Donald Trump.
This is a very important event because it follows the call that happened between His Majesty King Mohammed XI and US President Donald Trump on December 10th. The call, as you may all remember, included historical and important decisions, whether the case of the Western Sahara and the US acknowledgement that it is part of Moroccan lands, or the development in the Middle East and re-establishing relations between Morocco and Israel.
I'm thrilled to be standing next to our Moroccan and Israeli partners in Rabat to open the door wide to a new era of cooperation. Morocco and Israel are making huge strides on their commitments to resume full diplomatic relations, promote economic cooperation, and to reopen their liaison offices very quickly. This visit is enormously productive so far, and we have more to come tonight and tomorrow. The Moroccan and Israeli delegations have several MOUs and agreements that are ready to sign, and more are being drafted in a very wide range of sectors.
To Senegal now, where the largest children's hospital in the country, the Diamniadio Children's Hospital, has played an important role in fighting against the COVID-19 epidemic. The director of the hospital, Farmadien Gaye, has highly commended China for supporting Senegal through the maintenance of buildings, equipment and many other things. Gaye has also lauded China for being able to contain the virus in Wuhan and hopes that Senegal will be able to follow suit.
In the Sino-Senegalese cooperation, we also had a building called the Mother-Child Pole, which was built by China. This is a building for the care of mother and child, and it is this building that was requisitioned during the outbreak of the epidemic here in Senegal to be able to take care of people with the coronavirus. It will later house a maternity ward and a urology ward after the pandemic. We have seen the containment that has been put in place by the Chinese government so as to be able to control, especially the city of Wuhan, where the epidemic was declared. This city has been completely sealed off so that the virus doesn't really spread to other Chinese cities. That was well done. That was a decision welcomed by everyone. And it is a decision that we too as a country have tried to replicate this Chinese model here at home.
Egypt's Higher Education Ministry has hosted a car race around the pyramids of Giza, but the event was unique in that only locally manufactured electric cars participated in it. The competition picked the best technology developed domestically and is part of ongoing efforts to encourage the local production of electric cars. Adel Mahroui has the details.
After 9 months working on their project, students from 19 Egyptian universities put their inventions head-to-head for the ultimate test. Their mission has been to build an electric car with local components. This is the third edition of the Cairo Rally for Electric Vehicles.
If you look at the car behind me by Shams University, and even the cars that other universities made, you'll notice the development over the past editions of the competition. Every year, there's something new. Even the design is much more matured. There's fast progress.
Experts from the Ministry of Higher Education and the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology set the criteria for vehicles to enter the race. They always strive to introduce more challenges for participants each year.
The biggest challenge this year was making the car suspension. That requirement was added just this year. It's the first time we have gone through such an experience, and we started our research about the suspension system from scratch. In the previous years, the track did not need the cars to have suspensions, but these cars could not race on this new track without them.
With the dream of producing an electric car made of 100% Egyptian components in sight, the event ensures that students acquire the necessary skills for that. During the past 3 years, the domestic component in these cars increased from 50% in the first edition to 65%.
The students have gained huge experience from designing and manufacturing these vehicles over the past 3 years. Our target is to create a joint venture between the ministry and the academy to manufacture an entire electric car domestically with Egyptian technology. We will face challenges, but we will eventually do it.
Egypt is allocating more than $2 million for its electric vehicles programs. So far, 1,300 students have participated in this competition. The winners this year got about $35,000 in prizes.
To be part of a 30-member team working together for 8 months, 4 of them largely restrained because of the COVID-19 pandemic regulations, it was a tough journey to manufacture a car from home. At times we didn't know what to do because of the restrictions the coronavirus pandemic imposed on us, but we did our best.
The Cairo Rally was founded in 2017. It's the first technological competition of its kind in Egypt. 9 teams competed when it began, but this year, 30 teams participated in the event. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Coming up in business news. Egyptians abroad sent $22.1 billion back home in just 9 months this year, despite COVID-19 slowdowns. And a Cote d'Ivoire company launches black dolls to help African children find their own identity.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
South Africa is known for having some of the best yards in the world that build luxury yachts, but they all took a huge knock during this global COVID-19 pandemic. Things were starting to look up when a second wave hit the country, and there are fears this may cause yet another slowdown. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Kinetic Catamaran South Africa has built a strong reputation around the world. Its boats are highly sought after by big spenders in the United States and Europe.
We built 2 models, a racing version and a cruising version. The racing version has definitely more high technology on board. The boat has dagger boards instead of centerboards. We also have rigging sensors in the boat. It has a much taller mast, a longer longeron, a longer boom, so the whole sail plan becomes much bigger.
Each of these boats take up to 18 months to complete and cost between $2.4 million and $3.6 million. They're built from scratch by an expert team of over 40 local craftsmen.
The infusion and laminating teams would build the structure, we will make the parts, and then the primary assembly team would assemble them. Then we obviously have a joinery shop. We make all our own furniture, and all the furniture is a carbon skin over foam core with a veneer pressed onto that, so all this furniture is super light. And everything's made in-house.
During COVID-19, that all came to an abrupt halt and orders dried up.
Knysna has been very, very hard hit by COVID because it's a tourism destination, and the boatyards here in Knysna, I think right now are a major part of this economy. For 6 weeks our doors were closed. We started again on the 4th of May at 50% for a month. I was running 2 shifts basically with the crews, and from the 1st of June we've been at it all the time, 100% back at work.
Like so many other boat manufacturers, Kinetic had to adapt to the new normal of doing business amidst a global pandemic. COVID-19 wreaked havoc across the economy, but it also forced the industry to become more resilient. Now, with international travel resuming, the boatyard is hoping to cash in on new clients. Julie Shire, CGTN, Knysna, South Africa.
Egyptians abroad sent $22.1 billion back home in remittances between January and September this year, representing a year-on-year increase of 11.6%. The rise in the remittances was recorded despite the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has slowed most economies across the globe. CGTN's Yasser Hakim explains the role remittances have played in stabilizing Egypt's economy.
Remittances have become one of the major sources of hard currency for Egypt, which also relies on tourism, exports and Suez Canal revenues to fund its budget. But unlike other sources which have dipped this year, remittances have bucked the trend amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and rose by 11.6% according to data from the Central Bank of Egypt.
The optimistic outlook with the reopening of the economies after the first wave of the pandemic led expatriates to increase their transfers in the second quarter of the year to exceed 20% year on year. Some who feared to lose their jobs in the recession-hit countries have also transferred their savings as a precaution.
Ahmed Abu Zaid is an accountant who receives money from his parents living abroad. He says transfers have not been interrupted this year despite the outbreak of COVID-19.
I feel it is not related to the coronavirus. The transfers continued because there are many Egyptians working abroad like my family, and they still send their money for commitments here. The situation is the same and money is still coming to relatives in Egypt for their daily expenses.
Others in the diaspora have also been sending money to buy assets or invest in projects back home.
The economy is indirectly benefiting from these remittances as they are cash inflow of hard currency. The higher supply of hard currency in the market improved the Egyptian's pound exchange rate. This in turn stabilizes prices and strengthens the economy.
Remittances have been rising since Egypt liberalized its currency exchange rate 4 years ago as part of the IMF-linked economic reforms. This has played an important role in stabilizing the North African state's economy, with inflows adding to the foreign currency reserves, which is now recovering after losing about 22% during the coronavirus outbreak. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The festive season is here with us again. However, due to COVID-19 related restrictions, this time it won't be business as usual for many hospitality sector players. But some hotels in Kenya are recording increased business, giving them renewed hope ahead of the new year. CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports.
The Sawela Lodge, an increasingly popular holiday destination in Naivasha, Kenya, where signs depicting the festive season welcome visitors upon arrival. It's clear that business here is slowly getting back to normal as more guests check in. The hotel's management has been pleasantly surprised by the increase in visitor numbers, but it insists that observing the Ministry of Health guidelines remains their top priority.
As we prepare for festive period, we have put in place measures which will actually safeguard all our guests staying with us against the COVID-19 pandemic. We have also been certified by public health, and I must say we are doing pretty well in terms of the measures we've put in place.
The expanded dining area captures the surge in the number of guests. The chefs are also busy preparing delicacies specially ordered.
Compared to other years, this year from the time we reopened from the COVID-19, business has been booming for some time, and we've actually been operating at occupancy levels of more than 65%. So surprisingly as well, for the meeting rooms, they are all fully booked.
The rooms have to be well maintained to ensure they meet all the required health standards.
Before we reopened, we actually brought in staff members and did some training on the COVID, which was actually conducted by the Public Health Office based in Naivasha. They actually gave us guidelines. Everybody was trained and they know how to handle themselves during this pandemic.
2020 has been a difficult year for many Kenyans, and the festive season has actually offered an avenue to unwind. Hotels here are actually booked at 90% capacity, something that many didn't expect, but it's all about the mind, relaxing, hoping that 2021 will actually offer a good platform and a softer landing for so many who've seen the COVID-19 drought in 2020. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Naivasha, Kenya.
Frustrated by seeing store shelves in Cote d'Ivoire lined with almost exclusively light-skinned dolls, Sarah Coulibaly decided to launch black alternatives so African children can find their own identity in play. It has proved to be a clever business move, as well as, she says, demand is soaring and supply remains short. CGTN's Beryl Oro has that report.
'Tis the season, and preschool children in Jacqueville, Cote d'Ivoire line up to get their Christmas gift from Santa Claus. Until now, dolls would be fair-skinned and dressed in Western clothes. But this year, Naima Dolls is breaking the mold.
We have already seen in other sectors like cosmetics or hair products how the claim of an identity can change the course of the market. We have seen it. So when African women started to complain about the fact that their skin color did not exist in the cosmetic industry, there was a total revolution in that market.
Naima Dolls was launched 5 years ago to fill a gap in the toy market, and demand for black dolls following African fashion is high and growing.
We do not produce enough dolls relative to demand. That is why we want our own factory. That is what justifies that decision. Because today we are convinced that, well, we can see, by producing abroad, we can see how quickly we run out of stock, how much demand there is for the product, and so to get to the levels where we can satisfy, because there's nothing worse than creating a need and not being able to satisfy it.
I like everything that makes up the African woman. I like the materials, the traditional African materials worn by women across Africa. We got used to white people's dolls, and now we can see. Now we see black skin, the African woman.
She aims to mass-produce the dolls first for the market in Cote d'Ivoire, then sub-Saharan Africa, and eventually the rest of the world.
What we wish for today is to give children, the future generation, the weapons that will allow them to make the right choices. I just want for the African children to become conscious of the fact that they can also say, I'm beautiful, my culture is beautiful, my identity is rich.
For the moment, the dolls are designed at home in Coulibaly's Abidjan studio, then produced in China and Spain. They are then dressed, prepared and boxed by more than 20 women at Naima Dolls and then distributed for sale countrywide.
My first wish was to see my product grow commercially. But when it comes to the way the product is used, yes, of course, it is that we can accept ourselves as we are, and beyond that, the fact that others can also accept us as we are.
The company makes 32 different products. Out of these, 6 cost just over $18, with the most popular doll called Ajoba showcasing plump features, a celebration of African beauty and culture. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Coming up in sports. Kenyan striker Olunga scoops top award at the J-League Football Awards.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference. How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours?